Reasonable transfer policy is among the key features of a successful football club. Every system has its elements that work as one, and a football club is no exception. Unfortunately, not all managers seem to understand it, as there are still some who think that signing a bunch of star players may be enough. Though such an approach has already proven itself to be a wrong one, there are those who are still reluctant to learn from their mistakes. In this video, Goal24 would like to tell you about the worst transfers of the 20-23 season. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you won't miss our next video. Before we start, we suggest you take part in our small quiz. Which one of these summer 2022 signings was the biggest? Wesley Fofana, Aurelien Tchouameni, Darwin Núñez, Erling Haaland? Leave your answers in the comments. And now, let's go. Renato Sanches, PSG. Once Christophe Galtier took over PSG, he immediately went for the Portuguese Renato Sanches, the player he had already worked with while at Lille. Their partnership brought Lille the sensational Ligue 1 title in 2021, so a year later, the player and the manager reunited at PSG. Renato cost the Parisians only €15 million, as his contract with Lille was to expire in a year. Starting from his first days at the new club, nobody really expected Sanches to ever become a first-choice option for such a star-packed side, but rather to make occasional impact from the bench. In reality though, things went even worse for the Portuguese. He had to suffer one injury after another at the start of the season and never really recovered from them. They made the midfielder miss 19 matches in all competitions. Once he was back, each time there came another injury, leaving Renato Sanches no chance to get back in shape. So in the end, Sanches had to settle for 7 starts in Ligue 1 and 706 minutes of playing time in total, more than 2 times less than he had in his last season for Lille. On the other hand, he scored 2 goals and became the champion of France for the second time in his career. However, Renato's future is now far from certain. Rumors say that he may move to Galatasaray this summer, but they are yet to be confirmed. Gianluca Scamacca, West Ham. Last summer, the Irons were looking for a centre-forward to add much-needed quality in attack. Of all the transfer targets, they ultimately went for Gianluca Scamacca, the Sassuolo striker who scored 16 goals in Serie A. The Italian cost West Ham €36 million, which made him the 4th biggest signing in the club's history. David Moyes' team had a rough start of the season. They only gained 4 points in 7 Premier League matches, while Scamacca failed to find the net even once. After that, however, he scored in 2 consecutive games against Wolverhampton and Fulham. At that time, it looked like the striker had finally found his goal-scoring touch, but he has only scored 1 goal since then, against Leeds in January, as later he suffered a meniscal injury which made him undergo a surgery and miss the rest of the season. As he also scored 5 goals in the Conference League, there were 8 for Scamacca in all competitions, which is far from impressive for a striker who played 1,342 minutes. It may be still explained by adaptation issues, but it looks like Gianluca is already done with England. A number of Serie A clubs are reported to be interested in Scamacca, among them Juventus, Roma and Inter, so the Italian is about to be back home as he might as well take his Conference League medal as a souvenir. Charles de Ketelaere and Divock Origi. The 2 Belgians were the 2 biggest signings for the Rossoneri in summer 2022. Stefano Pioli's side had just won the league but still could do with fresh blood in attack, so that they could build on that success. The signing of Charles de Ketelaere was the most hopeful one. The Belgian joined Milan for €35.5 million after having rejected a number of English clubs. Milan were sure that they had just got themselves a top prospect, but the Belgians' first season in Serie A was disappointing, to say the least, as the newcomer looked the odd one out in almost every game he played. He seemed to have no chemistry with his teammates, and his best qualities, passing and vision, seemed to have disappeared. As a result, Charles only managed to make 1 assist in 40 appearances in all competitions, and that was his only goal contribution. And now compare it to his Brugge numbers: 14 goals and 7 assists in his last season in Belgium. It is reported that Stefano Pioli has already given up on the midfielder and asked the board to sell him, but AC Milan are surely going to have a hard time trying to sell a 35 million worth player who has had such an abysmal season. The player of much more experience, Divock Origi, who joined Milan as a free agent, could have had a better season too. The 28-year-old forward looked a pretty decent signing on paper due to his Premier League and Champions League experience with Liverpool. But even though Origi moved to a league of much less intensity, he only managed to score twice in 27 games and had to miss a lot of matches because of injuries. His arrival didn't make it any better for Rossoneri. In fact, they looked worse with the Belgian up front. So now, just like his compatriot De Ketelaere, Origi may leave the club and move to Turkey, but he might as well stay at Milan and try to show the football world he's not done yet. Fabio Vieira, Arsenal. Last summer, the Gunners signed Fabio Vieira for €35 million after the 22-year-old midfielder had an impressive season at Porto with 6 goals and 14 assists to his name. The fans expected him to be a first-11 option for Arsenal, and not without reason, but Mikel Arteta thought otherwise. He considered Vieira not fit for first-11 football and took his time integrating the newcomer into the squad. As a result, Fabio had to wait until matchday 7 to make his Arsenal debut. A week later, he was picked for the starting lineup for the away game against Brentford. Though he scored a stunning long-range goal, it was still not enough for Arteta to change his mind. So since that game, Fabio Vieira had only started 3 in the Premier League. Without Vieira on the pitch, Arsenal looked way more whole and balanced, which was the reason why Arteta was so reluctant to start him. And the question is, why did the Gunners go for him in the first place? Fabio Vieira scored 2 goals and made 6 assists, as Arteta is yet to figure out how to use him. Though the Portuguese will get another chance next season, there will be even more quality midfielders in the squad, so it's going to be extremely hard for Fabio to make it at Arsenal. Paul Pogba, Juventus. Back in 2016, Paul Pogba broke the Premier League transfer record as he moved to Manchester United for €105 million. He never found success in England, and last summer the Red Devils finally got rid of him as for the second time in his career, Pogba joined Juventus as a free agent. It all looked like a perfect deal for the Bianconeri. They got themselves a player in his prime for years to come. But soon after his presentation, Paul Pogba got a serious injury, which made him miss a number of Serie A games and the World Cup as well. Even in winter, when the World Cup was finished, it didn't get better for the Frenchman. He had to wait until February 28 to make his debut and then got another long-term injury. Shortly before the end of the season, Paul was finally back and played 8 matches in all competitions, in which he made 1 assist, and of course in all of these 8 matches we saw him coming in as a sub rather than starting a game. But Paul's injury nightmare was far from over. In May, he was injured once again, so the season was over for him. However, Juventus could have avoided that. They only needed to have a look at his injury history. 20 games missed in his last season at Old Trafford. But Juve's ignorance has already caused them too much, as Pogba has already missed 53. He is expected to recover by the start of the preseason training, but he might as well get injured yet again. And just so you don't forget, his current salary is more than €10 million per season, which means Juve had to pay about €65,000 for every minute Pogba played. Calvin Phillips, Manchester City. Back in his championship years with Leeds United, Calvin Phillips was already noticed by a number of Premier League clubs. Once the Peacocks won promotion to the Premier League, Cal's performance made the biggest clubs consider signing him, and last summer he was at last signed by the reigning champions Manchester City for €49 million. Josep Guardiola's side were in need of Fernandinho's replacement, a player able to play both in midfield and as a centre-back. It all started early in the season. Calvin Phillips played only 1 minute of football versus West Ham on matchday 1 before getting injured, so he had to wait until January before he made his second Premier League appearance for City. After that injury, Calvin found it too hard to get back in shape, so he was benched and had little to no playing time. Only when Manchester City had already secured the league title, Cal was allowed to start 2 matches. But no matter how poor that season was for Phillips, it was a massive success for his side as City won the Champions League, the Premier League and the FA Cup. Now the citizens would rather sell Phillips, but the Englishman is determined to show that he's got what it takes to play for such a big club, so we're yet to see how it unfolds for him. By the way, there's a video about Erling Haaland and other successful transfers of that summer available on our channel, so feel free to check it out once you're done with this one. Richarlison and Yves Bissouma, Tottenham. The Spurs' summer transfer campaign looked very promising on paper, and the ex-Everton Richarlison, signed for €58 million, was their biggest signing of that transfer window. The versatile Brazilian, able to play both on the left and as a striker, had to compete with the likes of Harry Kane and Heung-min Son, but still got his share of playing time. At the start of the season, Richarlison made 3 assists in the Premier League and scored a brace against Marseille in the Champions League. But after that, the Brazilian suddenly stopped scoring until April, as he faced incredibly bad luck with finishing and his goals being cancelled by VAR. When Tottenham played Liverpool away, Richarlison scored the late equalizer after his team were 3-0 down. But then, bad luck again. Seconds after he took his shirt off in exultant celebration, Liverpool scored the winner. In the end, the 22-23 season finished with only 1 goal for the Brazilian, definitely not what the wide audience expected from him. Yves Bissouma, the Brighton midfield leader, was another Tottenham signing of summer 2022. He cost his new club €29,200,000, so it all looked like a very promising signing for the Spurs. But what happened is that Bissouma played a bit more than 1,000 minutes in the Premier League and all he got was 6 yellow cards. In addition to that, he lacked consistency, as the midfielder never had more than 4 consecutive starts. In February, it suddenly got worse as Yves suffered a long-term injury. His broken ankle made him miss about 3 months, and though he was back shortly before the end of the season, it didn't change a thing neither for the player nor for his team. Sadio Mane and Ryan Gravenberch, Bayern. Last summer, Liverpool lost their key player, who was consistently scoring 20+ goals per season. That player was of course Sadio Mane. The Senegalese was unhappy with his treatment at Anfield and ultimately accepted Bayern's lucrative offer. The versatile striker, able to play on the wing and as a centre-forward, cost Bayern €32 million, and the German thought they got themselves a great replacement for Robert Lewandowski, who left for Barcelona. But in reality, things went totally different. There was no side of that Sadio Mane we saw at Liverpool. The Senegalese scored 6 goals in the Bundesliga by the end of October, but then got an injury and had to miss the World Cup in Qatar, in addition to many Bundesliga games, as he was back in the squad only in late February. Since that moment, Sadio has been out of the first 11 due to his poor form. When offered a chance, Mane never gave his side the quality he was supposed to give, and his decline was way too obvious. In addition to that, his discipline was also causing concern. The Senegalese got mad at his teammate Leroy Sané and punched him in face after the Manchester City fixture, which took place in the Champions League quarter-final. Late in the season, Julian Nagelsmann was sacked and Thomas Tuchel took over, but that appointment did not help the Senegalese at all, as he was still far from his best condition. That season finished with 7 goals and 5 assists in the Bundesliga for Mane, definitely not what was expected from him. Now it is rumored that Bayern are about to sell Mane, while Sadio would rather stay and prove his doubters wrong. Ryan Gravenberch is another Bayern newcomer who failed to meet expectations. Signed from Ajax for €18.5 million, he was expected to have plenty of chances to show himself. But Julian Nagelsmann had other plans, as the head coach didn't trust the Dutchman due to the player's lack of experience. In October, Ryan was given 34 minutes against Victoria Pilsen. Bayern were comfortably ahead 4-0, but then conceded 2 goals. And if the rumors are true, Nagelsmann lashed at Gravenberch in the dressing room after the game and blamed the youngster for those goals. Weeks passed, but nothing changed. In February, shortly before Nagelsmann was sacked, Ryan was picked for the starting lineup for the first time. And guess what? He was subbed off at halftime, while Bayern lost to Borussia Mönchengladbach 3-2. Under the new manager Tuchel, Ryan at last was given a decent amount of playing time and even was included in the starting 11 against Köln on the final match day, thus making his contribution to Bayern's Bundesliga victory. However, Gravenberch's future is far from certain, as Bayern are playing to sign more midfielders, while the Dutchman would like to have more playing time. But despite Liverpool's interest, we can't tell for sure if Bayern will let their young talent go, even though he didn't have the best of seasons. Antony, Manchester United. When the summer transfer window was already approaching its end, the Brazilian Antony finally moved to a bigger club, as he left Ajax for Manchester United with his old manager Erik ten Hag in charge. This signing cost United 95 million euros, plus 5 million as bonuses. Antony could never wish for a better start of his Manchester United spell. He found the net on his debut against the leaders Arsenal as his side won that game. After that, he scored from long range against Manchester City, though that time it didn't help his side to avoid defeat as City won 6-3. Then there was yet another goal from Antony against Everton. As surprising as it may sound, his next Premier League goal came only on April 16, after the Brazilian had failed to score in 14 consecutive games. In a blink of an eye, Antony went from a fan favorite to a scapegoat. The fans were done with his showboating. His only notable impact was that winner against Barcelona in the Europa League round of 32. But generally speaking, after a superb start, Antony tailed off completely, neutralized by the Premier League defenders. Next season will most likely be the moment of truth for the Brazilian. Will he manage to redeem himself, or will he follow in Jadon Sancho's footsteps and become yet another waste? Raheem Sterling, Kalidou Koulibaly, Marc Cucurella and Mykhailo Mudryk, Chelsea. Though the Blues spent more than 600 million euros on signings, they only managed to finish 12th in the 20-23 Premier League, which is their worst result in the 21st century. It's been a rough time for the whole team and the club in general, but still some transfers were extremely poor. So let's start with the new owner's first signing, Raheem Sterling, who had long been considered a Premier League star with 339 appearances and 131 goals for Manchester City under his belt. Raheem was given a hefty contract at Chelsea with the highest salary at the club, a bit less than 20 million euros per year. It might have looked very promising for Chelsea, as they got themselves a world-class attacker for 56,200,000 euros. Definitely not much for such a quality player. Unfortunately, Chelsea's crisis prevented Sterling from showing his best qualities. After he scored 3 goals and made an assist in the first 6 Premier League games, Thomas Tuchel was sacked. When Graham Potter took over, Raheem Sterling faced difficulties. He scored against RB Salzburg in the Champions League game, which was the first for the new manager. But then there came a goal drought, and Sterling didn't score once in the following 8 Premier League matches. The final numbers for Sterling were 9 goals and 4 assists in all competitions. Needless to say, it was not what the Chelsea owners and fans expected. The second signing for Chelsea was the centre-back Kalidou Koulibaly from Napoli, who cost the Blues 38 million euros. The Senegalese was offered a salary of 18 million euros per year, the second highest at Chelsea after Raheem Sterling. Kalidou started right off the bat as he scored against Tottenham on match day 2 and then had a couple of decent games. But with time, it became obvious. Koulibaly found it too hard to keep up with the Premier League's level of intensity. His lack of consistency became a problem, while his mistakes resulted in a number of conceded goals and lost points. Unlike Koulibaly, Marc Cucurella, another defensive disaster, won't be that easy to get rid of. The ex-Brighton joined Chelsea for 65,300,000 euros, thus becoming the most expensive left-back in the history of football. It all didn't look that bad at first. The Spaniard's versatility did please Thomas Tuchel, as Cucurella would play both as a left wing back and as a centre back, in a 3 at the back formation. But then all of a sudden, the former Brighton leader turned into a joke, and the appointment of his former manager Graham Potter didn't change a thing. The Spaniard clearly lacked confidence and composure, while his understanding of time and space left much to be desired. He would close down on his opponents too rashly, leaving too much space behind his back. As for Cucurella's outrageous mistakes, he kept making over and over again. That's a whole other story. It is believed that the reason for that was the Spaniard's house being robbed in autumn. But the player has had plenty of time to get over it. After all, nothing terrible happened. Now the Blues would rather let Cucurella go, but first they need to receive a decent offer. And it's unlikely that many clubs will want to sign a player who has had such an embarrassing season. Now to yet another Chelsea signing. Mykhailo Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk, snatched from Arsenal for 70 million euros plus 30 million as future bonuses. In his debut game against Liverpool at Anfield, Mudryk showed solid football. He came in as a sub and was a problem for the Scousers' defense. But that was more like an exception, as the following games left the fans baffled. Why would their club spend that much for such a player? Mudryk clearly lacked experience and was unable to keep his composure in front of goal. As a result, the Ukrainian wasted too many chances and hasn't scored a single goal for Chelsea so far. 2 assists in 15 Premier League appearances is not what's expected from a 70 million player. However, just like all other Chelsea new signings, Mudryk has an excuse. Not only he had to adapt to new surroundings, but the club was in deep crisis, which affected both the team's performance and the club's business. Potter and Lampard were unable to help Mudryk reach his full potential, but soon we'll see if Mauricio Pochettino will make any difference. A bad start doesn't necessarily mean things will never get better, but as a rule, footballers tend to struggle after a poor first season at the new club. As for our today's heroes, it's far from over for the majority of them, while some others will still have a chance to relaunch their careers in new surroundings. Dear friends, please let us know in the comments which one of these transfers do you consider the biggest waste. Thank you for watching and see you soon.